for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine. Willy Pérez originally wanted to be a musician, but after surviving cancer in his late teens, he decided to follow his father Luis into the wine business. A passionate defender of traditional sherries and vinos de pasto based on vineyard origin rather than maturation and fortification, he's become one of the key figures in Spanish wine. A profound thinker about climate change, as well as singing the praises of Palomino, the region's most widely planted grape. Hello, Willy, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tim.
Lovely to see you and to hear you. I mean, you're in Jerez, aren't you? Lucky man.
Yeah, now in my basement, this little, fresh because Jerez is, in the last 2 weeks was really hot. And so now I'm in the basement, really good temperature and having a good time with you.
And I can see some guitars behind you. You're a musician, aren't you? I know that.
I used to be. And when it was impossible with the winery, I started a recording studio. And it was like 2 + 3 years more working in music industry, but not anymore.
Yeah. Well, listen, so much I want to talk to you.
I just play piano and guitar sometimes,
Exactly. I mean, I've seen the temperatures in the south of Spain over the last week. It's been like 40 degrees, isn't it?
Yeah, it was crazy. Even we are in Cádiz, that is in the, as you know, the south of Europe. And if you go north to Seville or Cordoba, it's even hotter. And that's because the Atlantic Ocean. So it's not common to be over 30 degrees or something like that in Sanlúcar. 31 maybe in Jerez, but the last 2 weeks was a hell, like 40, 41, and it's not common.
Yeah. Not good. I mean, you used to it a bit because you were born in Jerez into a family of winemakers. I mean, almacenistas, vineyard owners. I mean, your family just bleeds sherry, doesn't it? Your great-great-grandfather, your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father, all worked in the sherry trade, and you're there as well. Was it always your intention to work in sherry?
No, not at all. I was supposed to be a chemistry. Well, I was supposed to be a music guy, but musician. But it happened a lot of things in my life, and I was studying chemistry. And when I was like 19 years old, I get really sick with cancer, so I needed to stay like 2 years in the hospital. I was with my father, and he was talking every time with me about the things that he was doing back then. It was wine. So it was like 2 years really tough with the battling with cancer, and I get in love completely with wine in those 2 years. So after that, I decided to finish chemistry and then start winemaking.
Because your dad, Willy Pérez, who's still alive, he's a technical director at Domecq, wasn't he, for a long time, and he's professor of enology at Cádiz University. So he's been a big influence on your life, hasn't he?
He's like an old genius, if you can imagine like Socrates or, this kind of people really, really relaxed and knowing a lot and always talking like, so probably obviously in the wine sherry thing, I learned everything when I was a child, but it's more like the philosophy style of life. He's like, you need to meet him. He's amazing.
I would like to meet him because, I mean, I've always enjoyed talking to you. And I think that you've told me that, you've learned a lot from him. A lot of your sensibility comes from him, I think, doesn't it, around wine?
Yeah, he's like super intelligent guy. So he practically started everything in Jerez. Like I can, it's my father, but I think I can say. And he started like all the studies about flora. He started the first known, I don't know if you know this, but the first free alcohol wine in Spain, like 40 years ago, something like that. He made a lot of different things, but he realized it like 25 years ago that Jerez was completely lost. So as you know, Domecq was the biggest winery in Spain for like 250 years or something like that. It was a huge thing. And it was sold by pieces in 1994. So he just moved to the university being like a catedrátic. I don't know if you have this word in English, but
yeah, it means professor. Like a super professor in a way.
Yeah, something like that. And he has been teaching all my friends on my college since in the last 30, 40 years. So he's like such a guy, you know, here in the region. Yeah.
And what did you study at university? Did you study chemistry first of all?
Yeah, I started in chemistry because I'm like two Willys. Okay, I'm pretty close to art. I love like reading philosophy, listening music, reading books, and another part of me is really scientific. Probably in the first 20 years, I was more into scientific thing. So I was completely lost in science. So I decided to study chemistry. My father started, that here in Spain, we can study winemaking from chemistry, from agronomist, from pharmacy, so like different careers. So I decided to start in chemistry and then let's see what happened. But it wasn't my intent at the beginning, to study winemaking for me was too romantic, and I discovered that it was completely linked also to science. And then in the last 25 years, I moved more to a more this romantic, philosophical, humanistic, maybe I can say, point of view.
Yeah. I like this. There's two sides of your personality in a way, really.
Yeah. It's pretty weird for people with suddenly read a study or something like that, and then I'm like playing music. Is
And so, how did you go into winemaking? Did you ever study it, or did you just go through the chemistry?
No, I finished chemistry. Chemistry is like 5 years here, and I lost 2 years with my cancer. So I needed to study it a lot in the last 2 years to recover everything. And then I moved to 2+ years of winemaking. We call here, as you know, enología. And then I finished. It's a long career. It's like 7 years. It's crazy to lost so much time. And I'm always complaining because this philosophical point of view I have, I think they teaches you how to be a vine grower, how to be a chemistry in wine, but they never tell you why. Why, Peter Sisek started Pingus, why Alvaro Palacios started La Ermita. And I think careers like architecture are well prepared for that. They teach you how to be an engineer and also how to, understand big architectures, why they started something. What Parker times, what organization, these kind of things I think they need to be teaching in the university and all the time talking to my college, the professor in the university, we need to change a little the career.
I think you're very right. I mean, what took you to Australia? Because I've read that you went there to learn about Shiraz, right? And you went with your friend, didn't you? And your business partner, Romeo Ibanez. Yeah. Where did you work? McLaren Vale somewhere, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was close to McLaren Vale. It was Langer Creek. Sorry, I every time I see the word, nobody understands me in English. It's Langer Creek, something like that. It was south of Australia. And it was, I was all the time trying to move to, in that moment to a new world place to work. So I was all the time to all my colleagues in the classroom all the time. Guys, we need to go to California. We need to go to South Africa. We need to go to Australia. Back then in the 2000s, and that moment, like Penfolds and all those guys was like they still doing that, but in that moment was like a completely fashion for us. We were in that super heavy Syrah style. So when all my partners, all my college said, during all the last year, we're going with you. Just look for the job. We will go there. But Ramiro, that as you know is like my college in La Riba, and also like kind of my brother now. He was like all the time. He never say a word in all the year. But in the moment that we need to travel, all my college say no, it's too far, whatever. And Ramiro say, yes, I'm going with you. So we moved to Australia. It was 4 months of heavy harvesting times. But we learned a lot there because, as you know, Australia used to make sherry also. And they were asking me all the time, Willy, how can we make sherry again? We need to make sherry because I was in Blaisdell. It was a super funny winery. We had super moments there, and they had like a big tank of cherry. It was from 19th century, something like that. And they all the time said, Willy, we need to make sherry. So I say, okay, I don't know why, but okay. So I explained and then everything. And they couldn't understand me properly, Tim, because they say all the time, why we need to fortify if we have a Chardonnay of 16% of alcohol, and why do we need to fortify? And I say, no, you can't do a sherry with a Chardonnay. You need a Palomino. And they reply, why? And I say, because it's like that. So, but I was understanding in the same moment I was replying that it was a bad answer, I couldn't understand why. I was just saying the things that they talked to me when I was a child. So when I came back, I started to read a lot because I was wounded in my pride. And now it was that happened 25 years ago, but it was a super fun experience and super good for me.
Yeah. I mean, your dad had already set up a winery called Vista Hermosa in 2002, which was making red wines, wasn't it, with Merlot and Syrah and Petit Verdot, amongst other things. Was he making sherry as well, or was he just making red wines from imported grapes mostly?
No, the story, as I told you, when we ended that thing of in the hospital from the window, this is not a sad story. I don't want the people to be sad right now, but from the window of the hospital, we could see Vista Hermosa, Macharnudo, and all the Pagos from the window. So like the next month, I was outside the hospital. He bought Vista Hermosa for us to make something that it was more like a healing thing that a professional winery. We wanted just to make wine to the family, to friends, but not anymore, not more things. So my father wanted to cut his relationship with sherry because he was a little disappointed for everything that happened since 1970s. So we started something different, looking for the terroir and the vineyard. But we started with red wine, as you told, like Syrah, Merlot. That's why I moved to Australia to understand how to make Syrah.
I see, yeah.
And that's the history. But at the beginning, Tim, for us, we started like doing like 1,000, 2,000 bottles. But as all our friends and whatever, they started to buy a lot of wine, and suddenly we were making like 4,000 bottles. And some friend, a clever guy, told us, guys, it should be professional because it's like Hacienda, the taxes and everything. So we started Bodegas Luis Pérez.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of years later, I think, when you were back from Australia, I think you were 27, you had this another link with the country, which was through James Busby, who was sometimes called the father of Australian wine. And you read that book written in 1934 called Journal of a Tour Through Some of the Vineyards of Spain and France. And it kind of changed your life, didn't it, that book?
Yeah, it was really important. At that moment, I was reading like crazily, every day with Ramiro. When I came back, I knew that my answer to these guys of Australia was a not good answer, as I told you before. So I started to read a lot to compensate my silliness. So, through all that books, Tim, when I started in from 1980s till that moment, everything that all the books I have, that Jerez has a lot of books, a lot of bibliography. So I read all that books, and it was the same message that I knew. But when I finished with all the books, I moved to 1950s book. And all the period was the same, but there was a super tiny difference, the message. Then I moved to 1920s, and the message was completely different. So every time I moved, I asked my father, look, Dad, I don't understand this. And he always say, this is different people, different times. They knew nothing about science, whatever. So I moved to 1870s books that are amazing. We have a lot. So, I'm talking about 150 books. So to make the long history short, I ended in 1834, finding a book. I found a book in my father's archive, and it was this book you have said about James Busby book. He met all the winemakers in the region in that moment. So he met Pedro Domecq, that was the more important winemaking in the story of Jerez. He practically invented the modern sherry with Manuel Maria González Ángel, who is the father of González Baillas. So it was like a Jedi and the Sith, It was like light and dark. Pedro Domecq was looking super heavy and complex wine. They called they call them the golden sherry, and Manuel Maria was looking for pale and super light wines. They call it the pales, and they were battling all the time. So, but Pedro Domecq, that started Macharnudo thing, as you know, is the best known pago in Jerez. The guy knew like crazy. You know, he knew. In the conversation with Busby, he practically, in 95% of that conversation, was about the vineyard, the soils, how to prune the vines, the disease, the fermentation, but not a single word about aging. So that was the message of a generation. You know, we grew up just listening histories about how big was the sherry to my grandfather, my father, but that was something really bad for my generation, that because we grew up rejecting sherry. And in that moment when, you know, Pedro Domecq was speaking our language, that about terroir and about, you know, this guy sold the more expensive bottle ever in Spain in that moment. And, you know, it was like a revelation. So the next day I like woke up being another winemaking. I practically said, you know, everything that I know for red wines and white wines, why we can't apply to sherries, you know? And in fact, I discovered that I was being super idiot, because sherry was that in the past. And as you know, the classification of pagos, soils, is huge, the information we have. So what we have been doing the last 20 years is just recovering that information.
So, being much more based on the vineyards. Tell us a little bit more quickly about the Sherry region, because some people listening to this podcast won't have been there. I mean, it's a beautiful place. Just tell us, what's the Sherry Triangle and what are the major climatic influences? I mean, you've said it's been very hot in the last week, but it's not always that hot because of the presence of the ocean, right?
No, in fact, Sanlúcar is a really cool place. Okay, we are in the south of Europe. Our soil is, I always say that we have like three highlights of terroir. The first one, obviously, should be the Atlantic Ocean. Without Atlantic Ocean, we couldn't have quality viticulture. It's impossible. It's like too hot, like Seville or something like that. But the maximum temperature we have here, the average is like 28 to 31, okay, depending on the town. So we don't have highness, because the maximum point is 136 meters.
It's not very high, is it?
No, it's really, really low. So as you know Spain really well, now we are climbing mountains looking for freshness in Spain. And we have like Gredos, we have a lot of different places because Spain is practically a mountain. But here, what we have is the Atlantic Ocean. So the closer we are to the Atlantic Ocean, the fresher and the cooler it's going to be. So we can drop the temperature like 15 degrees in 20 kilometers, just in the same heightness. So wow. That's one of the highlights of terroir, of course. Yeah. Second one is the soil. As you know, we have a super chalky soil. We have up to 60 to 80% of calcium. It's like champagne, probably a little less like champagne. But it's really, really, really our thing. You know, we don't have high acidity, but we compensate with like super high minerality and vibrance with the chalkiness. It's really, really important for our viticulture. So we divide this chalkiness in 10 soils, 3 of sand, 3 of clay, and 3 of limestone, which we call albariza. That means white soil. And above all these 9 soils, we have the outstanding classification that is only 1.6% of the albarizas that made the Gran Viña, or if you want a Grand Cru. And all are classified in 1771. And of course, the last one in terroir is human being. You know, having like this 3,000 years of history gets you a lot of information, a lot of inspiration. This guy, Pedro Domecq, Manuel Maria, whoever, every time you make a wine, you should figure out what happened in that parcel before, because probably they knew more than you.
And Jerez was underwater, wasn't it, historically? That's why you've got limestone. Yeah. It was under the ocean, right?
Albariza, the limestone we have, it's a precipitation of a kind of algae we had 15 million years ago. and it was super slow, Tim. It was like 1 millimeter every 100 years, more or less. So it was this algae lived from 50 million years ago to 5 million years ago. The precipitation was really slow, but it formed the Albariza. So depending of the era, the Tosca, the stone of Albariza is different. So it's giving you different properties to the wine. If it's soft, obviously the wine is going to be way more elegant. If it's hard and you don't have room for the roots, it's going to be too rustic. So in the middle, you have the Grand Cru with a little space for roots, but not too much. So we call it barajuelas or lentejuelas. When you have this kind of stone, you have the Grand Cru soil.
Let's talk briefly about the past, because you talked about the 1830s and the 1870s and even the 1950s and how different sherry was then. And it all kind of started to go wrong, didn't it, in the early 1970s? What you call, the arrival of big sherry. And what went wrong exactly?
Well, it's the same that happened in the last 3 centuries. It's the same. We had a crisis in 1770s. We have a crisis in 1870s. And we have a crisis that we are still living in 1970s. It was the same always, Tim. It was overproduction. So every time we reached the moment of maximum sales in the 70s, I don't know why. I have a theory about, we have something in Spanish you're going to understand, that you can translate for people, that is abuelo bodeguero, hijo rico, y nieto pordiosero. That means that,
So the grandfather makes the wine, the son makes the money, and then after that, the next generation ends up in the street, basically.
Yes, exactly. So that happened every 100 years, basically. Every time somebody start a flavor, these grandparents like Pedro Domecq or whoever, then the sons establish that flavor as the flavor of a sherry, and then the grandsons just sell. So the grandsons always need to support or need to battle a crisis of the taste. It's not something about sales. It's more like the world changes. It's like Parker times, not to burgundization, not heavy style to like the style. So if the grandsons don't know why in the first place the grandparents started that flavor, they're not capable to change it. So we moved from sweet wine to oxidative wines. We moved from oxidative wine to pale floor aging wine. And now we're moving from floor aging wine to white wine. And in every crisis, we never forget the old styles. Okay, we still making sweet, we still making oxidative, we're still making floor, of course, and we will do it in the future. But we need to be changing all the time, so that's really important for the terroir also in Jerez.
It's interesting because I think you said that everything's been done before in Jerez, all of the styles that you're making now. But I think what you're doing is really interesting because, a lot of the wines you make aren't fortified. And a lot of people, again, listening to the podcast will think, well, sherry is a fortified wine, right? And it could be fortified to a greater or lesser degree, depending on whether it's Fino Amontillado or Oloroso, Palo Cortado or whatever. But it wasn't always so. And it's very interesting, all this. And you're using a technique which is called asoleo, And is that, tell us how asoleo and vinos de pasto work. Just define those two things for us.
Yeah, okay. So asoleo was the original technique to reach 15% of alcohol. It's quite easy. You put the grapes under the sun, 1 day for finos, 2 days for olorosos. Every day you can reach it's like 1% of alcohol, more or less. It depends of the weather, but more or less. So that was mandatory till 1969. That year is practically yesterday, Tim.
So there was no fortification before 1969, except for cheap wines, right?
Yeah, that's more or less correct. It depends because nearly in the 70s with these grandsons, there's always fortification because fortification was the sulfur of the 19th and 18th century, is that adding sulfur, they add alcohol. So for the wines to travel. So, for the high quality wines, and I have been, researching a lot about it, and also distillating that wines, spending a lot of money in old bottles and analyzing it, that there was no fortification or just a little small amount of alcohol add. And in fact, in the second crisis, in 1873, there was an article in the Times that, as you know, in the moment was the only thing you have to inform yourself in the 19th century. So there was a German doctor that wrote an article called, I can't remember the name, but it was something like all English ladies are being, poisoned by sherry because sherry is being fortified. And it happened in that moment, it was true. But it doesn't make sense, The next year, the sales was drop like a half, half of the sales drop. There was a movement that they call it natural sherries, started by Valdespino with Inocente, putting somebody in the vineyard till the bottling, certifying that not a single drop of alcohol was added. It was a huge thing, and was the first, I think, that I know, first natural movement in wines in the world, and everything was bottled like natural sherry. And I don't know how to say notario in English. People that
a lawyer, basically,
a lawyer,
a notary, public
notary, certifying that. So just imagine. It's really, really difficult to start something new in Jerez. It's really, this guy, Pedro Domecq, I told you before, explain it. James Busby, the taste of every bat, you see bat, the yema, every bat in the vara. And he said the first two yemas, tasted like this. And the third and the fourth and the fifth tastes like this. It's really good for golden. At the end of the vara, it's really good for making pales. And they never harvest everything at the same time. And it was really important for them also. So those guys knew a lot. Yeah.
and when was the natural sherry movement? That was the 1870s, was it?
Valdespino started in 1875. So it was after that crisis. So they took the opportunity to make this natural style, and it was followed by all the wineries.
Yeah. So what you're doing, in a way, people think you're a revolutionary, but what you're saying is you're doing what they used to do before anyway, right? In the past.
Yeah, I wait a lot of time and stopped thinking that I never started something new. It's like a mixture of things that have been doing in Jerez in the last 5 centuries. Of course, we researched it a lot and we started a lot of new flavors, but everything is like a kind of, mixture, a blend of things of 18th century, 19th century. And every time Ramiro and me, we get drunk with an old bottle of the 19th century, which are not easy, but we can find it in Jerez. We say, man, we need to make a wine from this parcel. So that start a new period for La Riva, whatever. And which is the parcel? Is El Caribe? Is El Cuadrado? We don't care, and that is really important for us, team, because when we started this kind of sherries, for me and with my father, it was really, really important to be elegant with people. Just going to a region and being rude and saying, you are doing something really bad, I think it's not a good idea at all. And I think it's better to the people follows you or love you or whatever because you're doing something in community, So that's really important for us. Like going to a González Vías parcel or Fundador parcel, or I don't know, I don't want to name all of them, and saying this is a standing parcel, this is a world parcel, of quality, and we need to do something with it, and that's our point of view, of course.
I mean, how many more different wines do you make, and how many of them are fortified? Because you have 2 projects, really, don't you? You have Bodegas de la Riva and Bodegas Willy Pérez. And Luis Pérez is obviously named after your father, and Bodegas de la Riva is the thing that you've done together with your friend, basically. Palomino, Ibanez,
Yeah, Luis Pérez is the winery we started. As I told you at the beginning, is my everyday work. Is when I wake up in the morning. So in Luis Pérez, I really don't know, because we make like 5-6 new wines every year from different parcels, different styles. It could be like 20 whatever wines. And La Riva is way more chaotic. We can make like 25-30 wines a year. Different parcels, different all the styles, because we have been writing a book, 5 volumes book with 2,000 pages. That is perfect team to kill anybody if you throw it.
Is it finished? Is it finished yet?
Yes, it's editing, but it's so long that it's impossible. It's supposed to be in December, but I don't think so. So every time we went to a parcel to drop the soils or to meet the owner, there was an old cask there. And it was outstanding wines, probably from the grandparents or whoever. And if the wine represent the parcel, we just buy the wine and sell the wine. So that's another thing we make in La Riva, selling super old wines or super specific wines. But we don't have any rule in La Riva. In Luis Pérez, we don't buy grapes. Everything in the vineyard every day. In La Riva, we don't have rules. If we like the grapes, we buy. If we like the wine, we buy. Sometimes we make white wine from Notario, for example, or San Cayetano, that we own the grapes every year. But it's like no rules. Really funny.
You talked about fortification. I want to talk to you about flor. Flor, for people, velo in Spanish, which is a yeast which occurs naturally and grows on the surface of the wine in certain styles of sherry. You're on the record as saying less veil, in other words, less velo, more soil. Tell us what you mean. Do you think velo sometimes is a bad thing, that it basically hides the character of the wine?
It's a pretty controversial phrase, but it's true. The problem, it's not only about, the veil. It's about everything in winemaking. If you take something that should be a vehicle and you convert it in the ending, in the objective, that everything is bad. If you take the oak, for example, new oak, like 20 years ago, and you say, the more the new oak you have, the better the wine is the same. For us, it's the same with flor. In the last 50 years, probably, people thought that flor is the objective of a sherry. And I couldn't understand why, because if you speak to anybody and say, I have a Fino of 5 years aging, they say, good. If you say, I have a Fino with 10 years under flor, wow. I have a Fino with 15 years under flor, wow. That's something from distillates. It's for me, it's like you say, I have a Pinot Noir with 400 of new oak. I don't care, it makes sense or not. And that's what we have in, some parcels can resist 10 years. Some parcels only need like 2 years. We have, you ask me about the fortification. Sometimes it's better to do soleo. Sometimes it's better to fortify the wine. If you are in the Atlantic Ocean, you don't need that amount of flor because the wine is so fresh. Because for people to understand, this is going to be really easy and fast. The flor is the opposite of new oak. Opposite. New oak put your wine bigger, okay? Puts more volume, puts tannin, release more water. And we are in the south of Europe. We don't need that. We need the opposite. We have a big wine, so we need to reduce the volume and put your wine more elegant. So the flor eats alcohol and eats glycerin. Both of them, as you know, make the wine drier and cooler. So it's like a makeup for the south places. It's just like that. Sometimes you are an inland pago with a super heavy wine, and then you can have like 10 years of flor, and the soil and the parcel is still there. But if you abuse of flor, you have, people can't see my hands now, but you have like a valley between the entrance of the palate and the throat. So everything for me in wine in Jerez, the choky sensation is in the middle of the palate. So when you have a lot of flor, you lose that mid palate. And this is like a ballet. Then you drink a sherry, Tim, and it's salty in the point of your tongue, like manzanillas, Then there's nothing in the middle. And in the aftertaste, there's super heavy alcohol and bitterness. Then people put the face like a dry grape, and you say, no. You need to understand that sherry is like that or whatever. No. Sherry, and this is a present for everybody that is listening us right now. Sherry is a white wine. That's all. Yeah. If you know something about white wine, you know something about sherry. So the body should be connected. So if you abuse a floor, you have like a valley in the center. So you need just to have a perfect cylinder, like the super wines in the world. That's all.
I love that impression, or that image rather, of a perfect cylinder. And I want to talk to you a little bit about grape varieties, because I was intrigued to learn that before phylloxera arrived in Europe, there were more than 40 grape varieties in Jerez, and now there are just 3 main ones, really, Palomino and Jimenez and Moscatel, really. What did we lose? Because you've replanted some of them. I mean, I read about Cañocazo and Vijirega, and also you're famous for working with Tintilla, which is a red grape. I mean, is there interest in those varieties, in those pre-phylloxera varieties that we lost?
Yeah, it was super important for us because you never make oxidative wines like Palo Cortado from Palomino. Just a little portion of Palomino, but we used to have like Perruno also and Cañocazo to make these oxidative wines. So after phylloxera, that's something really long to tell, when we don't have time for that. But when we planted everything without grafting, it was completely different, because only Palomino can resist the top of the hills. The top of the hill is like Champagne, it's always more chalky. Okay, so in the direct route, you can, in that moment, only have Palomino. So when people, after the crisis of the phylloxera, replanted, there was a lot of removal. People didn't plant the lower part, and they only just preserved Palomino. So we lost everything in clays and sands. Until that moment, we almost lost all the grapes. So we used to have 78 grapes.
78, not
so
40.
In the moment,
78.
40 for whites. Yeah. 40 was white, and the 38 was red. Yeah. So when we lose the clays and the sand, we lose the oxidative wines. Then everything we're doing right now with all the oxidative wines is just pressing more. So through a second pressing, like up to 70% of a yield, we get the oxidative wines. And that is a winery style to provoke what in the past was done by the grape and also by the sun, because the oxidative wines always come from the oxidation of the skin. And that's when you make a natural oloroso or natural Palo Cortado, that comes always from the oxidative reaction from the skin of the sun.
So different grapes and from different soil types, as you say, from clay and sand. Listen, I want to ask you about Palomino, because Palomino, which is the main grape of Jerez, is sometimes described as neutral. It seems crazy to me. I mean, do you agree with me? I look at some of the wines being made with Listan, which is obviously Palomino in the Canary Islands, and some of the things you're doing. It's not a neutral grape, is it? That's silly.
The problem comes from the 1970s selection of clones of Palomino. We practically put 3 times the yield we had like 4 years before. We started in 1971. We ended in 1973 with that super plantation we did. And we just practically put like 3 times of yield. So if you move from 3,000, 4,000 kilos to 12,000, obviously you're going to lose the flavor, the taste. But if you taste the Canary wines of Listan or some Palominos right now, you know that this is the opposite. They are super tasty, super tasty. Maybe they are not like a, Sauvignon Blanc or the Muscatel or something like that with a peak of flavor. They're more like a mineral sensation, but the point that you have that they grows a lot in bottle. You know, like an old ring. It's like a growing with a dusty and gunpowder and curry flavors.
They're textural, aren't they, rather than aromatic?
The texture.
Listen,
beautiful. Yeah,
the stuff you're telling me is fascinating. I'm learning so much from listening to you. I always learn a lot when I'm tasting with you as well. But last question I'm going to ask you is, how do you get away from wine? I can see the guitars behind you. Is music still a big part of your life?
Yeah, I play piano practically every day. And the guitar, I used to play in a punk rock band, and I tour around Europe. I had a fantastic moments. I play in concert with Iggy Pop and all these garbage bands from the 90s and 2000s in big festivals. I was a super small band, but it was fantastic for me. I think I'm quite old for that right now, but having a recording studio could be a solution for my my thing if I don't work in wine. Yeah,
that's how you get away from wine. Okay, you have to tell us what the name of the band was. What was the name of the punk rock band?
School drivers, like a screwdriver, school driver. We were in school back then, but it was fantastic. Really, really good era in my life. Yeah.
Well, listen, Willy, it's been brilliant talking to you. I love your wines, and it's fantastic to learn so much from you about sherry. I'm so glad you didn't become a chemist. You became a winemaker instead.
Thank you, Tim. That's the best, thing you can tell me.
I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye. Well, I don't know about you, but I learn a lot listening to Willy. What a passionate guy. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Charlie Melton from the Barossa Valley in Australia. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @timatkin and on Instagram @timatkinmw. See you next week.